wife Trish, actually. It's made of spalted beech, which you may or may not know is beech that has defects in it, which give it this lovely black veined pattern. I don't know how well you can see it at the back. It's a beautiful piece. When Trish died, I gave it back to him as a memento of her. And then when he in turn died, his family very kindly gave it to me, and now I treasure it. And it inspired this next verse, which is called Spalted Beech. Again, this is another one that's half free verse, half rhyming. It stood all alone on a small glass shelf in a shop in a small side street. The moment my eyes fell upon it, I felt my heart miss a beat. The bowl, a simple bowl, exquisitely turned in wood, inanimate, yet full of life, silent, yet screaming, "Take me!" I reached out a tentative, trembling hand to touch and gently caress. I swear that it sighed when I touched it. It was something I had to possess. Its colour light, not far from white, but randomly veined in black. The label, Spalted Beech. Expensive, yet insistent. Buy me. I closed my eyes as I stroked its sheen, in awe at the wood-turner's art. And I felt, as he'd lovingly formed it, he'd embedded a piece of his heart. A simple bowl. Yes, my bowl now. And my heart still skips a beat. Familiar, yet ever fresh. Giving, yet demanding. Love me. And lastly in this section is, well, a proposal which I would like to think was accepted. Who knows? It's called May I Come In? If you would let me come into your life, I wouldn't make a mess. I'd close the door quietly, take off my shoes and tiptoe through your feelings. If you would lend me your heart, I wouldn't break it. I'd wrap it in cotton wool and protect it from everything but my love. If you would let me share your world, I wouldn't be greedy. It would still be your world. And all I want is a little corner. If you would let me be your future, I wouldn't fail you. Through thick and thin, I'd always be there for you to lean on. If you would have my baby, I wouldn't run away. I'd cherish it and love it, and later I'd teach it all that a child needs to know. Please let me come into your life. I won't make a mess. So, what do you think? Did she let him in? Yeah, I wouldn't bet on it. It's a dicey business, love. I mean, you find a girl, you fall in love, only to find that she fancies someone else. And so it goes on. I'll show you what I mean. This is called Circle of Love. Millie loves Joe with all her heart, but Joe is in love with Stella, while Stella pines for Nigel, who sadly is into fellas. The fella Nigel wants, though, is engaged to a girl called Jane, who is about to break it off. She's fallen in love again. She has now set her sights on Rupert, whose ideal girl is Georgina, who fancies a boy from across the road, where she thinks the grass is greener. The boy across the road is Fred, with a secret crush on Jenny. He tried to kiss her one night, but she wasn't having any. The object of her fancy is a boy in the class above, who goes by the name of Gazza. But he is deeply in love with Priscilla, the netball captain, who is way above his station, and hankers after Roger, which is bound to end in frustration. For Roger loves Kylie because of her hair, and Kylie loves Gordon, who just doesn't care. He dreams every night of his Anna Marie. Now, I happen to know that she fancies me. And how do I feel? Well, you may think this silly, but all that I've ever wanted is Millie. Sometimes it does work, of course. Here's a sonnet, 14 lines of iambic pentameter. Listen to this, that. I counted. This is called Puppy Love. Across the playground, hand in hand, they walked, oblivious to all who milled around, quite unaware of how their classmates talked and sniggered at the teenage love they'd found. Their eyes, hers hazel, his the deepest blue, saw only one another in their gaze. Their airs were deaf to anyone who smiled knowingly. Their love is just a phase. Their teachers made them sit apart in class. There's time enough for that when school is done, and you have O-level chemistry to pass. And anyway, 15 is far too young. They laugh at what those people used to say. Tomorrow is their golden wedding day. But sometimes it doesn't work out. This is called 6 feet. Another sonnet. Each day I watch you on the telephone, across the office just 6 feet away. I know each subtle nuance of your tone. Your gentle laughter fills my every day. We meet beside the drinks machine at 10 and share a word or two, a secret smile. At 3 p.m. I meet you there again, and sometimes, daring, linger for a while. Our hands brush briefly as we cross the room, as if by accident, and constantly my head is reeling from your sweet perfume, as I imagine how our lives could be. And yet I know I'll never share your life. I'm just the clerk and you're the boss's wife. Sometimes it does work out, but somehow you miss out. This one is too much, too late. It's also got 14 lines, so I suppose that's a sonnet as well. It's not a Shakespearean one. They were called the permissive 60s, the decade we all became free to share our inhibitions. But we missed it, you and me. They released Lady Chatterley's Lover, just as Lawrence had written it. And at last we were allowed to read every naughty bit in it. The censor started to let us see the parts that he could see. And Tynan muttered the F word on the hallowed BBC. The hippies gathered at Woodstock with flowers in their hair. And some of them took their clothes off, but alas, I wasn't there. The women started to take the pill, and so the lads all reckoned they could hop in bed at the first date, or at very worst the second. We all had licence to play the field and hop from bed to bed without the fear of pregnancy or having to get wed. But for you and me, my darling, it all came just too late. For we'd already married in 1958. And if you think love's difficult, just think what it's like for the male black widow spider. This is an appeal on behalf of a charity for battered husbands. The black widow spider, once the male's fertilised her, kills him and eats him for tea. This 8-legged animal's naught but a cannibal. Not very nice, you'll agree. But the male isn't bright not to put up a fight. You'd think it's a thing he expects. Before having nookie, there's surely a book he could read about having safe sex. Like, when it's all over, don't just roll over and fall asleep at her side, but make an excuse and prise yourself loose and go and find somewhere to hide. But the thing that's sad is the male spider's dad never has a prenuptial chat all about married life to a black widow's wife, and the hazards inherent in that. And the reason why is not that he's shy, or putting it off until later. It's simply, young man, before your life began, you'd already been eaten by Mater. And I'm not really much of a political animal. Years of working in local government, I'm not the only one here who can say that, made me wary of getting involved in party politics. But I do, just occasionally, with tongue-in-cheek, write something in verse. Immigration is always a very popular topic, or an unpopular one, whichever way you look at it. You may remember a couple of years ago that it was suddenly revealed that the Home Office had been employing illegal immigrants, cleaners. Well, I wrote this one called The Old Woman Who Lived in Our Shoe. There was an old woman who lived in our shoe, a village not far from Beijing. She had so many children, the government threatened to sue. For in China, just one child's a thing. They threatened to take all but one son away, and not knowing what to do, She stowed them aboard a junk one day with the aid of a bribe to the crew. When they got to Hong Kong under cover of night, they disembarked, money well spent. Then they hid in a lorry that, if she heard right, was headed for Dover in Kent. It wasn't a pleasant journey, but they got there in the end, as they travelled via A2 and M2 to London, the home of some friends who had a spare room with no view. The left-wing council decided that the family fitted the bill, so a vacant flat was provided. Though the local people weren't thrilled. The government didn't know what they'd done. They weren't a Home Office statistic. Well, they can't be expected to catch everyone. That wouldn't be realistic. And that's the old lady's story, as far as I know. Although that isn't quite all. The children all work in a sweatshop in Bow, while she cleans an office in Whitehall. Now here's a cautionary tale for anybody seeking high office. I have to say on this one that any resemblance to any living person is purely intentional. It's called White Sheep, Black Sheep. Gordon was a funny lad. He listened to his mum and dad. He didn't argue when his mother said, "I think it's time to go to bed." And when his dad said, "That's enough," he didn't go off in a huff and slam the door or things like that, or aim a kick at next door's cat. He just said quietly, "All right, Father, I'll do something different if you'd rather." He cleaned his teeth 3 times a day and always put his toys away. His little brother was a pest and wouldn't let poor Gordon rest. But Gordon gave a patient grin when Jimmy kicked him in the shin and said, "That wasn't very nice," and gave him brotherly advice on how he should be kind to others, particularly elder brothers. At school he was a model child. When other kids were running wild, he quietly got on with his work. The teachers never saw him shirk. And when the rest went out to play, Gordon was content to stay and collect up all the books for Sir, or clean the ball if he preferred. When classmates said he was a geek, he simply turned the other cheek. Then, when at university, the strongest thing he drank was tea. His tutors said he'd all go far. And when they called him to the bar, his parents' hearts both swelled with pride. They simply couldn't keep inside. Nobody since he'd been born ever said a word of scorn. But one May night, it's sad to say, the admiration died away. This man, who'd been so loved to date, became the man they loved to hate. The paparazzi followed him and snapped his wife down at the gym. The tabloid writer spat with bile. The Secret Service had a file. He hadn't cheated on his wife or been arrested with a knife. He'd not been caught with crack cocaine or plans to terrorise a plane. No walks on Hampstead Heath at night. No secret love child came to light. In fact, just like he'd always been, his private life was squeaky clean. So why this loss of favour then? He just moved into number 10. I'm going to let you go and find a cup of tea in the cafe now while I go and do much the same thing. just finish off with this one, which I hasten to assure you is not autobiographical. The girl next door is expecting a baby come the spring, and it was back in August that we had a little fling. She says she thinks it might be mine, although she isn't sure. According to her diary, it's one of 3 or 4. My chances of paternity are 25%. In fairness to the other 3, I think it's time I went.